Good evening. Welcome, everybody, to your city council. Thanks for attending online. The room is less full. We're going to convene the city council meeting. Let's all remember to turn off our cell phones, please. Today's land acknowledgement is going to be a little bit different. I saw the article in the Oregonian this month about Grandma Kiyakawa from Hood River, who's like 100 years old, who was put on a train on May 13th, 1942, to go to Tule Lake. So I think we should remember in May that we did that. We have a history of enslavement and displacement and internment. So as we go about our business, let's be honest about that. Let's say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Do we have any business from the audience online, Jen? Great. So then we will recess to have the urban renewal agenda. Vice Chair Saunders.
Thank you, Paul. I'm going to convene the Urban Renewal Agency meeting for May 28th, 2024. And I see we've got Councilor Polson online. Do we have either of the port commissioners online? Okay, great. So we have a quorum plus one. So great news. Do we have any agenda additions or corrections for urban renewal?
We do not.
Thank you. Any business from the audience for urban renewal? No? Okay, this is gonna go quick. Then we've got the consent agenda, approval of meeting minutes. Any discussion?
I move that we approve the consent agenda as written.
Second.
Okay, moved by Doug, seconded by Paul to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Oh, thank you, Heather. Opposed? Chair votes aye, or vice chair votes aye. Consent agenda passes. Let's see, we've got supplemental budget resolution. Will?
Thank you, Vice Chair. Members of the Urban Renewal Agency Board have a resolution 2024-04, which is a supplemental budget. This makes several adjustments to the fiscal 2024 budget. First is a transfer from contingency in the URA General Fund for training and meetings line item, and that's for real estate development coursework at Portland State University. Second item is a remittance to the Hood River tax collector of about $180,000, and that's for accrued interest that has built up on the fund balance of the Columbia Cascade District that have now grown in excess of the total spending authority for the district. And so we need to recognize the higher than budgeted beginning fund balance that came from that, and then send it over to the county. And so this will be an annual action that we will do from here on out, as long as the district continues to hold funds. And then the Heights District is budgeting for the earnest money payment for 1217 May Street. And that property transaction will close in July and is part of the FY25 budget. So with that, I'll take any questions you have.
Thank you, Will. I am gonna flag, I think the camera to see Will isn't working, but folks online, can you hear Will?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. And does anyone have any questions for Will? Not seeing any in the room, anyone online? Any discussion? Or I'm ready to meet, or does this need a motion, or is this just like second? Thank you. Okay. Thank you.
I move that the Urban Renewal Agency Board adopt resolution 2024-URA-04 to make appropriations and adjust the adopted budget for fiscal year 2023-2024.
Second.
Thank you, Grant. Okay, moved by Doug, seconded by Grant to adopt resolution 2024-URA-04 to make appropriations and adjust the adopted budget for fiscal year 23-24. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Vice Chair votes aye, motion passes. Let's see, West Side 5-year action plan, also the will.
Thank you. So this is a first of 5 tasks that combine together to be the West Side 5-year action plan. We wanted to start out with the community engagement plan task because this will influence and direct how we perform all the and complete all the tasks that follow. So we were really challenged in building a public engagement plan for the West Side because in essence, it is a funding mechanism that's placing resources to push forward 3 prior existing plans that all had their own high levels of community involvement and engagement. And that is the Parks Multi-Jurisdictional Master Plan, our Transportation System Plan, and our Affordable Housing Strategy. So the focus of this isn't so much a specific checklist of things that we will do, but more of a standard operating procedure that we will fulfill and follow as we take on individual projects in those master plans. So the kind of portfolio of projects has already been set. And so it's really the engagement rests in when we do those projects as funds are available, how will we engage with the community and direct those projects as they get fleshed out. So this engagement plan sets designated focus groups that we want to pay particular attention to, note some of the ongoing activities that we will do to get information out and also get engagement back, and then specific procedures that we will follow as we develop projects and as projects happen. So the designated focus groups are small business owners, potentially housing vulnerable residents who are already living in the district, and then also builders who will be helping to create the increased housing stock that we want to see on the West Side. Some of the activities that the engagement plan recommends and discusses is using our existing annual report that is required statutorily, and trying to do using that as the bones, but doing then more than what Oregon Revised Statute requires, and using that as a time to do kind of large check-ins, go around to overlapping district boards, meet with our designated focus groups and give them updates. And then as far as procedures go, it just what that discusses is kind of objectives that we want to achieve when we're engaging with focus groups and the public at large. Some notable procedures are including interpretation and other accessibility measures, working with partner organizations like the Nextdoor to be a conduit to accessing stakeholder groups, and then also considering compensation or other assistance to allow folks who may have barriers to participation. That could be something like gift cards or meals or provided childcare, things of that nature. So this engagement plan directs us to consider those when we're think about what we can do to increase accessibility as we engage folks in development of future projects. This engagement plan was developed with Echo Northwest and presented to the Urban Renewal Advisory Committee and was unanimously supported by the advisory committee. So that answer any questions you may have.
Any questions? Gladys?
You know, it's not really, I mean, I have a lot of specifics that I'd love to connect with maybe Echo Northwest of here are some other groups or places where people are gathering. You know, you brought up a good point early on that we don't really have a template for an action plan except for what we're seeing right now. That guides, which are the groups have been our partners in previous projects, just to have them, written down and engaged. Each project that we are looking at will also look to engage maybe different individuals or groups within our community. So I'd love to hear my peers' thoughts around an actual engagement plan, or maybe we adopt this as the general template and that we're looking at it on a yearly basis to make sure that we are addressing folks' needs, such as childcare. What if transportation comes up, right? So at our last budget meeting, we, I can't remember how much, but I do recall asking the question of, are these dollars to engage community in the future? And I was told that they were. So it sounds like we already have a pot of funds set aside to be able to incentivize, because we value people's time and their input. So I'd love to hear my peers' thoughts around that. Besides that, I don't have any concerns. I think this was all really well thought out. I appreciate everyone's time in putting this all together.
Thank you, Gladys. Paul?
I've observed the next door, and I think of them sort of as a master user of this engagement supports. I know gift cards, like buffet dinner, like they've done a great job of heading off some of the barriers. And it'll be interesting to talk to them and hear about the other ones they aren't able to head off. But I appreciate the concept, and if the actual goal is to get participation, figuring out how to remove the ones you can.
Doug?
I have nothing to add. I agree with what you both just said. I'll echo that.
Grant or Heather?
I don't necessarily have anything to add. As a framework going forward, what's proposed, I think is sufficient unless there's something specific that we're missing, but I don't, off the top, I don't see anything that's specifically missing that I've identified from this plan. If we get some feedback from the community that there's something missing, we can certainly incorporate in the future, but I don't have nothing to change at this time.
Heather?
Sorry, I cannot figure out how to get us out of my safe driving mode. No, I don't have anything to add. I think just transparency and good communication is key to making all the constituents happy. And it sounds like the plan is including all of that.
Thank you. From my end, Gladys, and I might have just not fully understood, are you looking for a more explicit, like the scope of work of actual implementation, or like adaptive management, or?
What I'm stating is that we don't have like a framework, right? Like think of our TSP, right? That it's available. We're going back and that's the template that we use to advance some of our work. We don't have something around how we're going to engage community, different organizations, different communities, to make sure that we are, meeting one of our goals of equitable and inclusive community. How are we engaging our constituents to make sure that they understand what is happening, they can help guide the work, spread the word around what's happening in our town. I think that Dustin and, some of the other groups did a great job in engaging folks for the Heights. So how do we continue to replicate that? I would love to see the same amount of turnout that we had for that for all of our initiatives where we're trying to engage community. Does that make sense?
Maybe not. I guess I thought like framework, big picture framework is what we're looking at now, but you want like a more.
Yeah, if it's this, then I'm happy with this, of the organizations that we're engaging, some of the questions that we're asking. One of the things I did read in here is that we're gonna look at past plans and see what individuals said around previous projects. So how do we take what we've already learned so that we're not maybe re-asking some of those questions? But if this is what's going to be the template or the framework that we use for community engagement, then let's adopt this and understand that we're gonna have to update this on a yearly basis or for different projects.
Okay, Abigail and then Paul.
Thank you. Counselor Sanchez, if I may speak just to that point, to Counselor Rivera's point, more generally, not specifically here, but one of the items that we have on Jackie Vanderpue's plate is to create kind of a handbook of community engagement strategies. And then every project to decide what is our goal for community engagement, and then have a menu of what are the options, what are the techniques, because everything can't be 100%, things but should not be 0. And so being able to tailor. So I think that speaks a bit to what you're talking about, of just having a structural process that we can go through and then say, we've gone through our analysis and here's what we're planning to do. So we don't have that yet. So what you see with projects like this and some of the others, we've needed to bring you things that we've created, but we do anticipate being able to standardize some of that into the future.
I think that sounds valuable. Paul?
Kevin came last week to my Equity Advisory Council and very specifically requested participation for the development code audit there. That group was identified as one of the 10 stakeholder groups. And so kind of pretty similar. So if we could have sort of a general sense of here's the menu maybe, or some options for we don't have to invent the wheel each time. We maybe have a mountain bike wheel. We just have to make it into a road bike wheel.
And just a little bit of more context too. Jackie was very involved in helping produce this engagement plan, and as Abigail said, it's on her goal to create that kind of toolkit. So in many ways, this does reflect Jackie's thinking and probably what you're going to see as far as a future product for all city work.
Okay, so yeah, it sounds like between what the city's working on and specifically with this as we learn and move forward, I mean, there will be adaptive management of what worked, what didn't, what to try next. Does that?
Yeah, it
Ms.
does.
Blank?
Thank you all. It's been a long day at work, so I apologize for not being able to articulate myself. One of the things I was looking at here is how we are engaging folks. So if we ever engage folks through a survey, is there QR codes? Who is Jackie connecting with at those times, just to make sure that we are trying to meet people where they are, or how are we relying on certain organizations to help us connect with our constituents? Sometimes we create a power differential unintentionally, right? So when we're trying to talk to individuals, they may not want to state everything that they're feeling, but when they are connecting to someone who's, taking them to their appointments or to their doctor, there may be other individuals that have more established trust with our constituents, that they'd be able to give more feedback on, hey, this survey didn't work for me. I don't have internet access. So I'd love to continue to see, Jackie, thank you so much for all your work here, but how do we continue to get better at engaging our constituents and making sure that we are making all this information accessible to them, plain language, through a variety of ways, whether that's radio, email, the mayor, through his Rotary meetings or anything along those lines. So thank you, Abigail.
Thank you, Gladys. Do folks have any other thoughts, comments, questions on the plan? I just had one question for you, Will. I don't know if this is part of engagement and more a bigger picture thing, but kind of the overlapping agencies, the county, maybe MCAC, some other folks. We had the whole conversation around, okay, they're not going to be on the governing board, but we want to make sure we're actively engaging them. Do you see that as part of like this engagement plan, or a separate, obviously a separate group? How do you fit that in, or is it a sidetrack, different conversation?
Yeah, that's connects to what I was talking about with the annual report, really making that into a much bigger deal and kind of a roadshow as a time, specifically a kind of a designated annual predictable time where we're going to go check in with our external organizations. I was thinking overlapping districts, but MCAC and MCED are great as well. Certainly so that's like kind of institutionalized and regular. I think it's a small community, and we know who is working in a specific service area when we do a project. So like, for instance, with the developer incentive program that I've been working on which is task 3. I've already met with MCAD because I know that that's kind of in their service area. So certainly I guess that we could add more of that into this engagement plan, but certainly like ad hoc as appropriate, we'd be reaching out to partner service providers.
Okay, yeah, I think that was, I mean, the annual report is a great avenue. And I think part of my concern in the previous conversation was that we would just do that and not be checking in on specific projects, specific implementation. And I think that especially like from Kat, that was the feedback I heard of, oh, don't get so far down the road, you forgot about us. And we could have, early on in the stages, we could have done something creative and good. So I don't know if it needs to be written here or how you want to incorporate that, but.
No, that's great feedback. Yeah, I think that's worth adding in here, just noting the different other service providers in the area and where they may touch aspects of the West Side Plan.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Anyone else, or I think we don't need a motion, but you have what you need?
I have what I need. Thank you for the discussion.
Thank you, Will. Then we are on to the Urban Renewal Agency bylaws update, the real meat of the meeting.
So this is part of the large project that we have for the general administration of the agency, which is to update its governance, administration, bylaws, kind of a look at just the inner workings of the organization. So we addressed governing board membership with an ordinance, and now we're moving on to the next level, which is bylaws. So these bylaws were last updated in 2012, and that was just after the Heights District was created, and the bylaws update coincided with the creation of the advisory committee. So the current bylaws are in your packet, and I have gone through and made multiple suggestions. The advisory committee reviewed these and unanimously supported these recommendations, which mostly are, I'd say, administrative in nature, although some of them do have some policy overlap. And the advisory committee did not have any input on whether or not their membership should change, but the membership of the advisory committee is outlined in our bylaws. So I'd maybe ask the vice chair the best way to proceed, if it's worth going through each one of these bullet points, or how can I best facilitate the deliberation?
I think, why don't we start going through bullets and then we'll kind of do a larger if there's things outside of the bullets. If that sounds good to folks. So we'll start at bullet 1, Article 2, Section 1.
Yeah.
Which is just establishing.
Yeah, I can hit them real quick.
You're gonna be more
Uh-huh.
efficient.
So this states the board's memberships and terms, which are actually already stated in the municipal code. So I suggest just removing that from the bylaws, because you could get into a situation like we are in right now, where the municipal code has changed and the municipal code is controlling, and we haven't yet changed the bylaws, and so they're actually in conflict. So I would remove that redundancy and potential for conflict by eliminating the membership from the bylaws, and just it exists in municipal code already.
Okay. I'm gonna pause at this, and are there folks that would not want to change this or want to have a larger discussion about this? Okay, so would everyone be comfortable with this bullet? Great, I'm seeing that, so we got that one. Easier one. Okay.
Second bullet is Article 4, Section 3, and I would just recommend aligning the quorum requirements with the city council. And that would then require with the new smaller board, require 4 votes, where now the way bylaws are written, you can move forward policy with only 3 votes. And I think that's just less likely to get confused or forgotten. And if we just align it with city council, as now the city council will be the urban renewal agency board, as much alignment as we can. think we'll just eliminate chances for confusion.
Yeah, and to clarify, that is quorum is 4 members and to advance policy is 4
4.
votes.
Yep, even if you're able to have a quorum to hold a meeting with 4, you would need unanimous support on every item in order to move it forward. And that, I'd say there's not a right way or a wrong way, but that's just the way the city council does it, so.
Okay. Wanting a discussion, uncomfortable with it? I'm seeing thumbs up here, folks online. Okay, Heather, you got any thoughts?
Sounds good to me.
Okay, great. Up next.
Yep, Article 4, Section 6. This, I'd say consider stating that resolutions be in writing. This requires resolutions be in writing. And so the board might consider saying that policy must be made by resolution, because it's a bit incongruous to say that resolutions must be in writing. But if you can also make policy outside of resolutions, then it's to what effect, why is it of such importance that resolutions be in writing? So I guess either remove this or also add to it that policy will be made by resolution.
Okay, I guess how does city council address or not address this?
Maybe we can go back to that one.
Okay,
Uh-huh.
well, we'll come back to Article 4, Section 6.
Article 4, Section 7 states that we will use Robert's Rules of Order. Found that most everyone knows basically how Robert's Rules works, but almost nobody knows everything about Robert's Rules of Orders. And if it's in our bylaws, we must follow it. And so I would suggest that the chair or vice chair, whoever's running the meeting, can choose to run it by Robert's Rules, but we maybe not tether ourselves to that requirement if we miss a technicality.
Okay, thoughts? You guys are comfortable in person, folks online? Grant, look like you're thinking?
Generally I agree with that. I just want to make sure that we don't get too loose with Robert's rules, that we start to skip over it and get too loose in general. That's all. Generally, yeah, I agree that we don't hold every single meeting hard and fast to every single thing that's in the book, which is fine. But yeah, I don't want to necessarily get to a point where we just toss the book out, because then potentially it gets very.
Yeah, again, what are we matching what city council's rules would?
Sorry, I did not do the cross.
Sure. It's my easiest form of reference.
I can go back on the resolution in writing. The charter appears to be silent on that.
Okay,
I'm now checking council rules.
I imagine some of this may live in council procedures.
Okay. Well, we'll come back to that as well, just to clarify. But Article 5, Section 2.
Yep. Removes requirement to provide a listing of expenditures made since the last regular meeting for review by the board. So this used to be the practice of both the city and the agency, and the only way I found that out was by seeing old packets when I was doing research on something else long ago. But when I joined the city in 2016, neither the agency nor the city was continuing to follow that practice, and these bylaws hadn't been looked at in quite a while. And so, it wasn't known that that was a requirement in the bylaws. So since we haven't been following it for many years, I would suggest, and because it's also a pretty outdated practice, I would suggest removing it.
Okay, thoughts? Folks online? Okay, great. So we're good on that one.
And now, Section 5 or Article 5, Section 3 establishes the membership of the advisory committee. A different resolution that we can get to, that is planned to get to at a future meeting, states their roles, duties, responsibilities. But the membership is set in these bylaws. And so if we did want to revisit their membership structure, this would be the time to do it. The advisory committee did not have any input.
Would it be possible when we are updating that resolution to add a section about membership there and have bylaws just refer to it or be silent on it?
Absolutely. Yeah.
That seems slightly easier to manage long term. Please, anyone else? Jump in, okay. Heather, Grant, thoughts? Okay, I think,
I agree with what you said.
perfect, so we'll go to a resolution on that one.
Okay, so maybe retain that advisory committee exists, but remove the specific membership requirements.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Article 6 looks like.
Yes, and so the next two I would say verge the most on policy as far as versus just administrative cleanup. So it is already on the work plan for this year to revisit how the agency pays for its overhead services from the city. If we wanted to address that in a very simple way in the bylaws, I think we have the opportunity to do that now, but only if we want to. So if we added that the agency will be charged in the same method and methodology as other city departments, that would be a sort of constantly dynamic and updated methodology versus existing methodology, which is kind of talking about proportionate shares of positions, and then also the current IGA, which was, I think, from all the way back in 2008 or 2009, has things like other staff marking down hours, which has just never occurred. So so I'd say a static methodology can be precise, but also precisely wrong. And once set, very quickly becomes out of date. Versus if we were to charge the agency in the same manner as other city departments, kind of checks fairness, transparency, may not be perfectly accurate, but it doesn't have a bias towards over or undercharging. Should net out over time, and at least is not constructed to be overcharging or undercharging the agency. So if we wanted to make a simple choice and just charge that, I've run the numbers, and it's actually very, very similar to what the current allocation is in the budget right now. Just is spread against the districts have different kind of readjust between the districts because the districts are of different sizes, and how we do overhead charges right now is based on the relative size of client departments.
And I'm aware this can change, but remind me, our current allocation is based on like the annual budget for each department, or in this case, urban renewal district.
Yeah, it's 1 year prior actuals, last year's adopted budget, and then the proposed next year's budget. So it's an average of 3 years.
Okay. This one seems slightly meatier. Start thoughts. Paul?
To me, it sort of feels like we're proposing a change that makes Urban Renewal Agency kind of a little bit more like a department of the city. And I don't know that that's bad, but it seems like, as you say, this is actually a policy decision.
I'm generally in favor of the way the city does, but more dynamic allocation methodologies than fixed allocations, which is problematic. Is there anything to note about the statistical values that denote those dynamic allocations and how it may not be applicable here? It seems like it is, but anything come to mind?
I just say that it's extremely fluid and it changes from day to day. Dustin can't really discern, when he's helping out with urban renewal versus when he's doing planning work. The Venn diagrams overlap quite a bit there. Similarly, I attend the directors' meetings. I provide input and support, just from prior knowledge, and help other departments out. Sort of like use as an example, STR enforcement. I've stepped in and helped kind of get us through the hump of this, getting the current the amortized properties out, and now I'm handing it off and training other folks. We do really operate as one single team. And so to create kind of this artificial barrier between time spent on urban renewal and time spent on city, really they're kind of they have the same objectives, kind of goals. We're all pulling in the same direction, and we're all kind of working as one team. So I would say anytime you're going to create some sort of methodology to create separation where separation doesn't actually exist, it's going to be artificial and kind of immediately out of date.
I understand that, and I do see, the equality between all the things can be really valuable. I guess, especially as I'm thinking about, West Side, and we're planning to spend a lot of money. It does feel like West Side's gonna be paying potentially more than its fair share based on the current way it's allocated. That I have some concerns there that, like, obviously those budgets at some point are gonna be massive, and not that won't take staff time to implement, but are we kind of, at some point, does that mean urban renewal is gonna be subsidizing parts of city operations?
It's 146 million is a massive number, but it's probably going to be over the next 30 to 40 years. And inflation is going to pick up, and the whole city will get bigger as well. Our public works funds are pretty big themselves. Water, sewer, storm are pretty big dollar amounts are involved every single year. I don't think urban renewal is going to start eclipsing the city government in size. But that's just intuition. Certainly we'd look at that 5 years from now.
This is getting outside of urban renewal, but that's always been my discomfort with the current allocation in the city departments as well. I guess thoughts from folks who haven't spoken, so I can't talk. We haven't spoken yet. Grant?
Yeah, I was trying to find the right hand button. Anyway, we are a small city, small town. We have a small organization. That understanding that and accepting that and understanding that's how we operate, and being in the same position myself, it does not make sense operationally to continue to pigeonhole or silo our people into very defined, narrow scopes that are very rigid in their sense of work. They have to work integrated with each other, and so easing that burden in their administrative task makes sense to me. And we'll answer one of my questions in comparing and contrasting the differences they experience in terms of an agency versus a department, in that we don't really have much difference in between those two things. I understand the desire as to why the agency was set up in that way, and is sort of desired to kept that way. However, that's not going to be how we work and how we're going to optimally function, I don't believe. And if we continue to do so, I think longer term, it's going to rob us a bit of our dynamism. In terms of scope of the budget, our annual budget citywide's $40 million, including all of our public works and everything else, annually. urban renewal total over the entire cost of 30 years is going to be 130, 140. So we burned through that much money in less than 4 years total. So as far as a overall scope in terms of budgets, urban renewal, though a sizable chunk, is not going to, everything else we do is going to dwarf that dollar over the course of years. So I'm not necessarily as concerned about that one. So yeah, as far as the proposal to reallocate dollars as proposed, it makes sense to me. I understand and would like to explore a little bit more the proposal in terms of it being department versus agency and any other pitfalls around those two groups. If there's any other reason why we should continue to look at those two things as separate things and treat them as separate things, even though operationally in our day-to-day, we don't look at it that way.
Okay, do you have any thoughts on department versus agency? Or does that need more time to?
Well, there's some there's some like statutory requirements as far as treating the agency separately in some respects. One of the biggest one in my mind is that we do our own separate financial audit. But we actually also are part of the city audit. So that's kind of gets into that duality, right? And complication is if you were to look at the city's audit, those numbers include the agency. We just also do another audit as if the agency was separate. So again, it really does live in that hybrid. We're of the entity. Well, I guess the financial term that they use in the audit is a separate but related entity.
Okay. Gladys, do you have thoughts on this one?
I mean, I would. Yeah. Yes, no, I would be okay, adding this section here. No other comments from me.
Heather, do you have thoughts?
No, not really. I think I'll let you guys hash this one out.
Okay. Well, does anyone want to?
Propose we include it.
Okay, can I see thumbs up or thumbs down for this? Okay. Well, I think we're there then. And Heather's a little bit out, but yeah, there's maybe from my end, I'm on board, maybe a larger conversation outside of urban renewal of, we haven't looked at that allocation, I think in my time on council. From the city's perspective. So that might be it's a separate note for Abigail.
Yeah, absolutely. It will, and I would just sort of say in there, you know, if we don't state a specific methodology, we just state that the agency will be charged on the same basis, then if revisited, it will automatically trickle down and impact the agency. So we'll always be on
Correct.
the same.
Yeah. So I think I'm on board with the rest of my agency members. But yeah, note for Abigail. So then another Article 6.
Yeah, so this is another new one would be added. So another way that the agency is separate is that the agency board is its contract board. So it awards its contracts for the agency separate from the city. So I would suggest just adding language that if a contract had already been awarded through a solicitation of public by the city council as contracting board for the city, that the agency can take advantage of the same terms, conditions, rates to perform agency work. Still need to be within budgeted appropriations and so forth, but could save some time and energy.
And I assume that is fine under public contracting law, whatever rules, whatever they are.
Yeah, we could take every, so yeah, we currently contract with the city. Like if we paid the city to perform the work that they were then paying to do, like you can contract with another governmental entity to do anything that you can do. But maybe if Dan's online, I'll ask him if he wants to, or has any additional input.
There. Yeah, the issue is the public procurement process is sometimes pretty cumbersome and in order to do it correctly. And so it doesn't make sense to replicate that process when it's already been done. And state law allows what was known as the piggybacking of contracts when they've followed the process correctly.
Yeah, I'll add another example is our cooperative purchase agreements that we piggyback off state. When the state Department of Administrative Services, we just pop onto those.
Thoughts from folks? Seeing thumbs up in person. Heather, you got any thoughts? Okay, that one seems to be a go ahead. So going back to, was it Article 4, Section 6? The city charter is silent on resolutions. Do we want to copy that or do something different? Oh, Abigail?
Thank you, Counselor. I've got the council procedures or your general rules up, also silent on whether resolutions need to be in writing. And then since I have you right now, it has some language around Robert's Rules of Order. Under Section 6, which is council motions at public meetings, so specifically to that, Section A of that says, unless otherwise provided for by these rules and by law in the opinion of the city attorney, the procedure for council meetings will be guided by Robert's Rules of Order, latest edition. So,
Okay, guided but not following.
correct. I think that was an intentional word choice.
Okay. So Article 4, Section 6, resolutions. Based on what the city's doing, do we want to change what's currently there? Do we want to copy what the city's doing?
It seems like almost farcically anachronistic to say resolutions to be in writing. That feels like it was written in 1854, so I would say that's something.
To match city or something else?
City's fine.
Okay, thoughts from others? Okay,
Yeah, I would emulate what the city is doing in this case.
so we're gonna be silent on it, it sounds like.
Strike it.
Yes, match what the city doesn't say. And then Article 4, Section 7, which is the Robert's Rules of Order. To Grant's point of not having to follow explicitly, but perhaps being guided by is good language to copy. Do folks feel pretty good about that? I'm seeing a lot of nods. So I think if we could change language to that.
If I could, Madam Chair, I'm not a super big fan of Robert's Rules of Order when it interferes with the body trying to formulate a motion and take action, because it has an amazing number of picky procedural rules about how you can amend a motion and, withdraw a second and all these different handshaking provisions. And it really interferes with the progress. And so that's why I always say, just follow it as guidance, because it is very, very detailed.
So you're comfortable with the guided by language?
Yeah, the guidance language in the council procedures was my idea.
Okay.
So it's
We'll
my
copy that
idea
again then.
here too. I didn't major in parliamentary procedure, but I've got a cheat book that I use, and even still, I will interject a shortcut to get around some of these difficult procedures. And that's all. It's not, I've never seen any of my bodies junk the process and start just unilaterally kind of going crazy in a procedural sense.
Okay. Well,
Could
thank you.
happen, but
We'll take the.
just watch it.
That guidance. So I think that's all the bullets Will had initially suggested. Do folks on the agency board have any other thoughts or changes they saw, want to flag or talk about? I'm gonna start with Doug. Paul?
There is a little bit of a sort of overarching moral hazard, which to the point of the gentleman from the library district, we got to make sure that we're not just willy-nilly using urban renewal as a sort of convenient amplifier of the city's goals. It's not exactly the same, and so somehow making sure that we have some awareness of that additional obligation. I don't know if it fits in any of these sections, but the idea that we're not gonna just. We're gonna stick tight to the mission of urban renewal, and not just use it to expand the city's operations.
Thank you, Paul. Will, is that a bylaw thing or a mission statement or
So we are, we just went through the West Side District formation and everyone observed how long of a process that is and how many procedural steps there are. And now we are bound to that plan. So we can only engage in projects that align with the goals of that plan. And so that is the sort of built-in constraints there. Like we can't, trying to think, can't go build a police station over on the west side with West Side District money, no matter how much the city wanted to. It's completely divorced from any of the goals of the plan. So the boundedness of the expenditures are not as an agency, but as each district has its own adopted plan and policies for amending or changing that plan.
I can see, to the larger point of kind of constantly reminding ourselves or the future versions of ourselves. I think both the board and the advisory committee that I don't know if it's institutionalized in the bylaws that admittedly I'm not sure any of us had read in a while. Or somewhere else, but that is a good reminder that should be regularly brought up. That even more than our city council roles, we are kind of carrying the weight of the larger community. So thank you, Paul. Gladys, did you have anything else on the bylaws? Heather? Grant? Okay, I had two minor things. I can't get through this. A little bit. So let's see. Article 3, Section 5, the chair and vice chair are elected annually. The bylaws say in July, and I believe we've always done it in January when we do council president elections as well. And so I'm wondering if we just want to align that.
Good catch.
Folks comfortable with that? Okay, cool. And then one other one was Article 5, Section 1, committees. So all committees are appointed by the chair. I guess unless otherwise ordered by the agency board. So that was kind of my larger question is, do we want the chair to be appointing everyone, or does this give us flexibility?
I think this is a provision that's never been used.
Okay, so maybe it's not gonna be a real problem.
Because we've only had the advisory committee and we've never set up any ad hoc urban renewal committees that I'm aware of.
Okay. Well, then I don't necessarily need to change it, I just wanted to flag it, so I think we'll leave that one alone for now. So it looks like we'd be looking for a motion spelling out what we have head nodded at all night. Does anyone want to broach an effort at that?
Are there some articles that we should call out as differing from what was proposed to us by staff?
So of the notes I have, we are Article 4, Section 6, striking that language around resolutions. Article 4, Section 7, we are gonna say guided by Robert's rules. Article 5, Section 3, we're gonna just reference the advisory committee, but everything else will be in a future resolution. And then change the time of year when the chair is elected to January.
What's that in?
That was
Article 3, Section 5 is what you said.
Article 3, Section 5.
Mhm.
And then I think the rest of the bullets are matching what was suggested by our administrator. Everyone else's notes match.
I think I'm confused on Article 4, Section 6, the in writing one.
We are striking language around,
Writing and writing, and we're having it be parallel to the way the city does it. Is that what I remember?
which is nothing. Yes, that is correct.
Strike in writing and otherwise silent.
Just strike the whole reference to resolutions.
This is gonna be very hard to do.
Yes.
Is there any way we want to have staff just include it all and bring it back to us and we vote on it?
Yeah, I've got it.
Okay,
I've got this all in notes. I'll bring it back in a resolution for you.
great. Well, then thank you, Will. And thank you all. So we have the last one is letter of support for the jurisdictional transfer.
Thank you, Vice Chair, members of the agency board. So this is, have a two-pronged strategy with ODOT. One is direct negotiations and one is applying through the Jurisdictional Transfer Advisory Committee for consideration for legislative appropriations. So ODOT direct negotiations, they realize that roadway is a liability, not an asset. And so negotiations have kind of surrounded on what is adequate compensation to take on that liability. But there is no money in ODOT to further our plans for the district. So that's where the jurisdictional transfer advisory committee and our request to be considered for legislative appropriations is kind of above and beyond seeing if we can get some money to move forward the Heights Streetscape plan. And as part of the pre-application for consideration by that advisory committee, request a local letter of support. And actually the only required signatory is the city. But I thought it would make us look stronger if we had also the agency, the transportation district has already signed on, and then I presented to the school board last week and they're considering signing on. And those are really all of the districts that have whose missions overlap with the objectives and goals of the Heights Streetscape.
Hold on, I'm confused. Did I just hear you say that the school district is considering?
I presented to them and they as a discussion item, and they are deciding whether or not to add it to a future agenda to take action.
Because their logo's on the draft that we see here.
Just a draft
Okay,
will be removed if they do not sign on.
okay, cool.
Any other questions, comments? Paul?
I move that the agency board authorize the board chair to sign a letter of support for the jurisdictional transfer of Oregon State Route 281 to the city of Hood River on behalf of the agency.
Yeah.
I'll second.
Okay, moved by Paul, seconded by Gladys to have the agency board authorize the board chair to sign a letter of support for the jurisdictional transfer of 281 to the city of Hood River on behalf of the agency. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Heather. Opposed? Vice Chair votes aye, motion passes. Thank you, Will.
Thank you, Will.
And then we've got items from agency members quickly. Grant, anything?
Nope.
Okay, Heather? Gladys? Paul?
Nothing, Dad.
Nothing.
Doug?
None.
Nothing from me. So thank you, Heather, especially for logging in. And I'm going to adjourn the urban renewal meeting for the night.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Addition or corrections, agenda additions or corrections to the city council agenda, Abigail.
No,
And maybe I asked you that before you, sorry. Business from the audience, anyone online or is it going into the room? Great. Presentations, Chris.
Okay.
Thank you. So the 2023-2024 council work plan called for the study and consideration of new SDC rates. Just as a review, the stormwater SDCs were established in 2007, transportation SDCs last revised in 2013. Water and sewer system development charges were most recently adjusted in 2015. The system development charges, which are the fees that are used to help fund capacity upgrades to city water, sewer, storm, and transportation cities, are necessary as a result of the growth and new development. We've engaged FCS to provide a SDC study, and they are here today to present their report. Doug Gabbard of the FCS group, and online are Luke Nelson and John Ghilarducci. So with that, I will yield.
Fantastic. And
to
where's
Doug.
right there?
There we go.
Diggity dog. Is that visible? Oh, I'll do share screen. I can do that.
Yeah, and then.
I have the, let's see if I have the confidence to do that.
Seasoned professional.
Yeah, man, we're not civilians here. All right, so I guess I'm on. Good evening.
Hello.
I'm Doug Gabbard with FCS Group, and I am joined by Principal John Ghilarducci and Senior Analyst Luke Nelson. You can't see them in the gallery right now, but I know that they're there, and that is a tremendous comfort to me. Tonight, we're going to be talking about our results of the SDC study that we have been collaborating with city staff on. We'll start by talking about some general characteristics of SDCs. This is going to be repeat for some of you. For some of you, it might actually be helpful. We'll talk about how at a qualitative level, how these SDCs are calculated before we dip our toes into the math. And then we'll talk about the assumptions going into this particular study, and then things will get mathy. And then we will go over the results of the study. We'll talk a little bit about scaling and how we can address affordable housing needs. And then we'll talk about a comparison of jurisdictions because we know people are interested in that. So, with apologies to folks who know this pretty well, let me just remind you of a few things. SDCs are one-time charges. They are not ongoing rates. Nobody gets a monthly bill for SDCs. They are paid at the time of development, or if there is intensification, at the time of redevelopment. In Oregon, SDCs are allowed for 5 services: water, sewer, stormwater, parks, and transportation. Other states have different services on their list, and this is Oregon's. SDCs are for capital only in both their calculation and in their use. They are not meant for operating expenses. And I got to tell you, they're not meant for that much capital either. SDCs are designed to pay for the capacity increasing projects or the capacity increasing portions of projects. The law was very specific that this is the only slice of an asset's life cycle that SDCs are meant to pay for. And once that's done, your ratepayers and taxpayers better be ready to take over with operations, eventual replacement, and the life cycle continues. So I wanted to bring that out as a point of emphasis. SDCs can include both an existing and future infrastructure cost components, and we'll talk more about that. SDCs are for system facilities, not for local facilities. It's like a share of stock. You're not paying for specific public improvements. You're paying for a share of the whole system. So at a qualitative level, let's talk about the SDC calculation. There are up to 2 layers you can have in an SDC. One is called a reimbursement fee, and the other is called an improvement fee. So a reimbursement fee is based upon the eligible value of unused capacity in existing facilities. Notice all the qualifiers there, and they're all important. And that dollar value gets divided by a measure of growth in system demand, and then that is your reimbursement fee. The improvement fee is another fraction, the numerator of which is the eligible cost of planned capacity increasing facilities. And that dollar figure is then divided by that same growth in system demand, usually the same growth in system demand. And you put those two fractions together, and you have the total SDC. Drilling down just a little bit on the growth part of it, the denominator in both of those fees, the way you come up with that is you start by identifying what units you're using. And so for water and sewer, in your case, and frankly, in most cases, meter capacity equivalence, that's MCE, that's the ability of a meter to push water through. And that is what demand is measured in. For stormwater, impervious surface area is a great way to measure demand. And for transportation, it usually comes down to some flavor of trips. And we'll talk more about that, what your flavor is in a minute. So we use those measures, first of all, to quantify your current customer base. And then we peer into the future with the help of your planning documents, and we identify what that number will be at the end of the planning period. You subtract the latter from the former, and you end up with your denominator. The numerator of the reimbursement fee comes about by identifying available capacity in your existing system. And for the wet utilities, let's say, that typically comes from a master plan where an engineer has said, I'm just making stuff up at this point. They have a reservoir that holds 5 million gallons, but they only need 3 million gallons right now. Okay, so you have 2 million gallons of available capacity that you can ask developers to buy into, and that is what a reimbursement fee would do. So it starts with identifying this available capacity, and then we have to cost it out. We then have to ask finance people to say, okay, how much did this stuff cost you? And then we use that information to calculate the reimbursement fee cost basis. And we have to net out a few things. If there is an outstanding debt on an existing asset that has been identified, your ratepayers are paying debt service, and we don't want to double dip. So we exclude any outstanding principal and any grant funding under the same principle that no double dipping is allowed. We make sure that is not included in the SDC cost basis. We don't ask developers to pay for something that somebody else is already paying for. That's the idea. Okay, that's what goes into the reimbursement fee numerator. The improvement fee, this is the part that most people think of when they think of SDCs. They think of project lists. And you have a project list, and you have big project lists. If you've seen the back of the presentation, I'm not going to get into it unless you ask a question, but dang, there are a lot of projects, right? And you have to go through each one to determine to what extent does each of these projects create capacity for future users. And that is what we call their eligibility. That works out to be kind of a percentage. And that's that middle bullet there. We determine their eligibility percentage, and it can be by project or by category. It matters if there is an existing deficiency, and there are all kinds of math things that get involved here. But really, what it comes down to is, to what extent are these projects benefiting future users as opposed to the existing customer base? So just wanted to identify some key assumptions that go into the numbers you're going to be looking at. So we have selected the growth measurements, and we will be identifying them by each system as we go through that. Meter capacity equivalence is what you use in your wet utilities, or your water and wastewater utilities, impervious surface area in stormwater, and also trip ends, and we'll define that even further as we get into transportation. There is some kind of forecast involved in all of these SDC calculations, some of which terminate at a specific time, and some of them terminate at build out. And build out is not a time, build out is a set of conditions. And you can use either one. You can use time, you can use build out. Build out is often preferable because it's often more comprehensive if you know what the build out conditions are. And so we have a sum of each in what you're going to see. You have to go through, as I said before, go through the projects, determine eligibility for all of them. We have some tricks to make that easier. We have different kind of buckets we can put things in. But that is in its essence of project by project choice. Trip ends for transportation, that can get really into the weeds, and I don't want to bore you with this because you'll start to fall asleep on me and that would hurt my feelings. But you usually begin with vehicle trips. This is what your TSP will typically quantify trip generation as vehicle trips. And we have converted that in this study to person trips, which is the number of people making a trip regardless of mode. So it introduces modes other than vehicles, because your project list accounts for transportation facilities in addition to those that help vehicles. So if you have bike and ped projects, it would be good to measure your growth in things other than vehicle trips, right? So that's what we're trying to accomplish there. I also wanted to note that there are multiple sources we use to get the project list that you have at the back of the slide deck. They come, in our case, they come from 3 sources, and this is a very common thing. Your master plans are typically the most comprehensive single source, but things change and master plans go out of date very quickly. And so a city will have a capital improvement plan that is much more recent, but also much more short-term. Well, we use that when we have it. And then the third source, because things do move quickly, is staff. We use staff input to massage the project list to make sure it is the most up-to-date, the most accurate, and that the costs are as accurate as possible for the current time. Now, I bring this up because we are not, let me back up and say, the law requires the project list that the SDC is based on to be an adopted list. But it doesn't say which list. It doesn't say that your project list has to be in your master plan. It doesn't say that your project list has to be in your 5-year CIP or any other particular list. It just has to be in an adopted list. And so we provide that in our SDC documentation so that you can adopt that with your SDC methodology, and the project list will be in the SDC methodology. So it's a nice little package we try to wrap up in a bow for you. All right. Enough hand waving. Let's talk about some numbers. So this is your water SDC. Total projects in excess of $52 million. The average eligibility, remember that we went item by item, but on average, the eligibility was 39%. So 39% of those project costs benefit future users. And with water, we have really cool tricks. Like if you're taking, if you have a 6-inch pipe in the ground now, and you are upgrading to an 8-inch pipe, we can actually measure the increment of that will benefit growth. And that's the percentage we use for that particular project. So your eligible cost for water is just a little over $20 million. Now, moving down to further adjustments, you have an improvement fee fund balance of a little over $840,000. By the way, I'm going a little more slowly on water. The other ones look exactly like this, and so we won't linger as long, I promise. But they're all set up this way. Improvement fee fund balance represents SDCs that you have charged but have not spent yet, and therefore whatever projects they may be used for are still on the list. And so we have to make sure we capture that as sort of pre-collected SDCs for your current list. So we deduct that. We also identified a reimbursement fee cost basis just under $1 million. So this is the example that I told you about, where there was some asset identified or some function identified in your master plan that we were able to find available capacity. We costed it out with the help of staff, and boom, it's a little under $1 million. In addition, State of Oregon allows you to include compliance costs in your SDC. These are the costs of running a legal SDC program. The law mentions accounting fees. There's an SDC accounting that needs to happen. It also mentions the cost of making methodologies. We happen to know what that is, and so we can make sure that's included. But it's not meant to be a general overhead charge. And some of our clients sometimes get into trouble if they overinflate it to include general things that it's not really meant to include. But we've taken a look at that, and we've talked to staff about it. So all of those together get you a little over $20 million. Now we're going to divide. That's the numerator. Now we're going to divide. And we have growth in meter capacity equivalents of 1,911 over the 30-year time horizon. And we're using 30 years for this system. And so doing that division, you end up with an improvement fee of $10,579 per MCE, a reimbursement fee of $510 per MCE, and compliance fee of $47 per MCE, making the total SDC $11,136. And the handy thing about using MCEs is that a single family residence, which is kind of the general currency of comparing different SDCs with each other, a single family residence is 1 MCE. So 11,136 would be the SDC for a house, if you haven't scaled it yet. Foreshadowing. Let's talk about wastewater. Yes.
Right, and maybe it doesn't work because it's not going to be equivalent for sizes, but so is it like the 3/4 inch pipe is 1 MCE, or is it like the amount of flow, or?
So it's and Luke, if you want to jump in and let me know what 1 MCE is it indeed 3/4 inch pipe? But it is tied to a meter size. And the meter size represents the amount of throughput.
Luke Nelson, for the record, it is 3/4 inch pipe.
Thanks,
Per
Luke.
meter.
Perfect. Does that answer your question? Great. All right, wastewater. So now we're moving from 30 years to build out conditions, because this is what your planning document gave us, and it's perfectly okay. Sometimes we get questions about whether the different utilities should be synchronized, like they should have the same growth assumptions throughout. Well, you'll notice if you skip down to the growth in MCEs for wastewater, that's higher than what you just saw for water. Is that a problem? No, it's not a problem. The consistency we're chasing is between numerator and denominator. So as long as the project list is designed to serve the growth that is in the denominator, you're golden. The fact that your sewer growth does not match your water growth, no importa. Don't worry about it. Okay, total project cost, $39,575,000. The average eligibility, determined on a project by project basis, came out to about 26%, which leaves you with a total cost basis of about $10.3 million. Some adjustments to that: you have an improvement fee fund balance of a little over $250,000. You do have a teensy bit of reimbursable capacity that we were able to add, so we did. And compliance costs of $104,773, which leads to a total numerator of just over $10 million. You divide that by the growth in MCEs that those projects are designed to serve, and you end up with an improvement fee of $3,655 per MCE, reimbursement fee of $6 per MCE, compliance costs of $38, and the total MCE, $3,699 per meter capacity equivalent. Stormwater. So this was a fun one to do. because you had such wonderful information about your buildable lands. And we made good use of that. So we had more detailed information about your potential growth than we normally do, which makes the spreadsheet geeks happy. So that's good. That's me. Total project costs in your project list, a little over $35 million. Average eligibility 66%, which is pretty high. So what that indicates is kind of a lot of your stormwater infrastructure is going to be new. And so that leads to a total eligible project cost of $23,347,000 and change. So some adjustments to that, you do have a fund balance of a little over $200,000. There is unfortunately no reimbursable capacity, which is not at all uncommon for stormwater. It's very rare that you have reimbursable capacity in stormwater. And compliance costs of a little over $77,000, which leads to a total numerator of $23,186,057. So we actually have a measure of the square feet that of impervious square feet that are going to be added to the system. That's a little over 18 million. And so we have an improvement fee per impervious square foot of $1.29, a compliance fee that doesn't even register, but is there. And so rounding off to 2 decimal places, a total SDC of $1.29 per square foot, not MCE, per square foot of impervious surface. We will later multiply that by 2,500, which is your standard definition of an EDU. But you can charge that on a square footage basis, and we suggest that you do so.
And sorry, what's an EDU?
Mistake on the, you just highlighted, this is a mistake.
Yeah, though the label at the very bottom that says total SDC per MCE, the MCE should be ISF.
Oh, so, what's EDU?
EDU, equivalent dwelling unit.
So that's standard residential. Okay, thank you.
I was thinking, can I just spit some more out just for fun? But no, I don't have any at the ready. Okay, transportation. Total project costs of just over $297 million. Transportation is typically big numbers. Average eligibility of just under 50%, which is pretty healthy for transportation. And that leads to a total eligible project cost of just shy of $136 million. Adjusting with the current improvement fee fund balance, just under $74,000, no reimbursable capacity, which is not at all uncommon for transportation, and compliance costs of just under $90,000. So we have a total numerator of $135,739,868, and there's probably change in there, but we went to the nearest dollar. So we measured growth in PM peak hour person trips. So you're planning your TSP will have that in PM peak hour vehicle trips, because that is the most common way to measure trips for planning purposes, because you're always planning for peak capacity. And so we just converted that to person trips, which is a slightly higher number, of course. And that count is 22,075 person trips expected over the planning period, which in this case is a 30-year time horizon. So that leads to an improvement fee of $6,149, a compliance fee of $4, and a total SDC of $6,153 per trip. You still have to convert that, which we will provide that list of land uses. I'm sure you've seen something like it before, but there's a whole list of land uses provided by the Institute of Transportation Engineers, where you then apply the per trip cost to individual land uses. But in the lower right side of the slide, we have a little cheat sheet for you because everybody compares single family residences. And so for a single family residence, that SDC translates to $9,161. Let's recap. So for water, we calculated a maximum SDC of $11,135.91. Here we're going to go out to the pennies now. And an MCE is the same as a single family residence on a 3/4 inch meter. So that's the same as a single family residence. Likewise with sewer, $3,699.19 per MCE or single family residence. Stormwater, $1.29 per square foot, multiplying that by your standard definition of an EDU, $3,228.36. And then what we just looked at, transportation, $6,153.21 per trip, translating to $9,161.16 for single family residence, leading to a grand total of $27,224.62 for a single family residence. Just as a, if I can backfill for just a moment, these are all the SDCs we looked at. Not that anyone has mentioned it, but I do want to just make sure I said that this is distinct from the school construction excise tax, which is something else that development has to deal with, but it's not an SDC. It's not calculated the same way. It's a different animal, but developers do have to pay it. So we're just looking at SDCs. I wanted to make sure I got that in there at some point. And now I've done it. So $27,224.62 for a single family residence. Now, how can we help more modest dwellings charge a more modest set of SDCs? So we looked for some data and we found some data. Now this is for the Portland metro area, which is as good as it's going to get, because in the real world of data analysis, you have the data you want when you have the data that's available to you, and you take the data that's available to you, right? So what we found is, what this slide is telling us is that there is a documentable relationship between size of dwelling unit, that's the x-axis, and the number of people living there, that's the y-axis. There is a correlation, but only to a point. And then it stops. And so we've identified with this set of data that point is about 2,600 square feet, where the correlation, the upward slope really no longer holds. And so that has enabled us to come up with one possibility for how these fees might be scaled. Now we've left we've left stormwater off of this table because you really can't do any better than charging per impervious square foot. So do that. For the rest of these, you can use this table or a table like it, which we've set the point of the average house in Hood or the average house in Hood River paying the average SDC that I just read to you a few moments ago. But then it goes up and down from there if the size is smaller or greater. But if the size is greater, the SDCs only go up to a certain point and then they stop going up.
The 27,000 was based off of a household. Remind me again, just because I lost that number.
Yeah, I don't blame you. So that's the number we were just looking at. Now this is for, if you're comparing to the scaling, it's probably good to look at the individual ones, because we didn't include stormwater on the scaled one. So the 11,135.91 shows up here for water. And then it goes higher to a point, and then lower to a point. And the point where it stops going lower is when you no longer have one, the modeled number of residents is less than one, which gets messy, in probably literally, right? So this is an example, that's an example of something that you could charge. I don't, there's an infinite ways to skin that cat. You could have you could do it a lot of different ways, but we offer this to you as kind of a principle that this is a way that you can do it. I will say that in Washington, the kind of thing you're looking at right now is the law. And maybe that might become, maybe it might become the law here. Now, I don't like it as a law, because as you've noticed, we've stopped the scaling at a certain point here. And the law in Washington says that we have to keep the fee, they're called impact fees in Washington. You have to keep the impact fee proportionate to the size of the dwelling unit. Which does that mean that the bigger it gets, you have to keep going higher and higher and higher? This is not yet been tested and worked out. We're continuing to do it this way in Washington, but that will be interesting to see how it develops. So let's compare to what you are. I don't even know if it's what you're currently charging. It's what's on your books for the next fiscal year, and you'll notice that all of these go up. Some of them more than others. And it might be at this point that you're asking, do they really have to go up this much? So this is where I have to give you the little speech that no, you're completely in control of your SDCs. So the SDCs that we calculate for you represent a ceiling that you should not transgress unless you want to take on some legal risk. But if you're going to charge something below that ceiling or at or below that ceiling, you don't need a rationale, you don't need an explanation, you don't need a reason. It's just don't go higher. Everything else is fair game. And I tell some folks, you don't have to charge SDCs at all if you don't want to. And of course, the reason they charge them is because the revenue comes in kind of handy, which I totally understand. But just realize that you are in control of how much you charge, and it's totally up to you, up to the limit that we calculate. So in that spirit, let's look at some comparisons. You are currently in this list, which is, I don't know that this is the list of comparables that is most important to you guys, but we wanted to get kind of an eclectic mix just to kind of show you what the possibilities are. You've got metro area cities that tend to be on the higher side of this, but then you have little old Independence, Oregon, little old town near Salem at the top of this list. We put that on there for fun. But the point is, you're currently close to the bottom of the list. If you impose what we've calculated, it would get you much closer to the top, but not nearly at the top. So I wanted you to have a flavor of both where you are now and where you could be, depending on the level of your comfort in imposing a new SDC. So let's chat briefly about implementing this and what the next steps would be. This conversation that we're having right now is informational. You are not actually allowed to take action on this, even if you wanted to. The required process is that we pick a day for the public hearing, and we issue a 90-day notice that literally has to be mailed. That's what the statute says. Literally has to be mailed out to folks who are on your list. And really, if there are no people on your list, you should put people on your list. Anybody who can reasonably be thought of as interested in SDCs should be given notice that you are considering changing your SDCs. So we're going to issue a 90-day notice the week of June 3rd. The methodology, which is the statutory language for the report document that has all these calculations, It contains what I just went over with you tonight in greater detail with all the project lists. That needs to be available by July 9th. And then you get to continue to march toward your public hearing on September 9th. And that is the point at which you would take action to set or not set whatever SDC you are comfortable with. Now, there's more choices than just deciding on a level to implement. We also like to encourage the strategy of phasing in SDCs if there is any discomfort with a large change. Because obviously you're going to get pushback from the development community if you're planning a large change. And a way to help them, because they probably have some near-term projects in mind they're trying to push through their pipeline and get built without having to deal with this huge change in expenses that they weren't counting on. You can phase in a change to your SDCs over 3, 4, 5 years, whatever you like. And that way you solve their near-term problem, but you don't leave years and years of revenue on the table. It eventually steps up to whatever level you want it to be at, as long as it's at or below the maximum. So phasing in has many times we have seen been a successful strategy to make it palatable enough that it gets done. And then there are other practical issues that we can talk about if you're interested in issues like indexing the SDC each year according to a cost index, the issue of providing credits for developers that build public projects. What happens when an existing development changes its use? How do you assess SDCs on that? I'm open to answering any of those questions if you itch in any of those areas. But for now, I will say I've said many words and I'm going to pause. What's on your mind?
Before we get there, I wanted just to share a couple notes that I took, because I think some things that I just want to highlight. So Doug mentioned the school excise tax. We should also note that there is a Parks SDC that is not charged by the city, right? That's charged by the Parks District, and the city collects it. So we collect it, but we do not control that. So there is a Parks SDC that is not a subject of this conversation because the city doesn't dictate that. Want to talk about the project list very quickly. As Doug mentioned, this is outlined either from a master plan or a transportation study or other sort of governing document. It was reviewed by the planning department and reviewed by the URA. So we sort of called any projects that we didn't think were sort of still in the pipeline. So there is sort of a source document behind that that was reviewed. We looked at the 30-year time horizon with regards to selecting a time horizon. It seemed the most applicable and relevant because that's the same general time horizon we're talking about with the West Side Urban Renewal District. Sort of if you want to sort of get an idea as to our best guess as far as what does the build out look like for a lot of these improvements, we just sort of pegged it a little bit to the West Side urban renewal because that's where a significant amount of activity will be going. There was discussion of the impact fee fund balance. You've seen this actor before. We call this the SDC fund balance, right? So when we're talking about, for example, the transportation, right, sort of impact fee balance, that as the road SDC balance, right? And I just want to call that out because, again, they've identified $135 million worth of sort of eligible SDC transportation projects, and our fund balance is $74,000, right? So I just think that's just sort of an important call out. Along those lines, Doug did present a significant sort of increase in the calculated SDCs. Again, that's not where this needs to end, right? But I think it is illustrative of what are the actual costs. And I want to make one important note because anything that is charged below sort of the maximum SDC, right, has to get picked up by something, right? And SDCs are only for improvements, right? Operations, maintenance, and replacement, right? Replacement, repair are all borne by the ratepayers, right? So SDC costs not collected, right, have to be picked up somewhere, right? And it either gets picked up by the ratepayers or the city, right? So I just want to note that.
Chris, and then Gus.
That's me. I have a few questions, some of them loaded, some of them pretty simple. Chris just mentioned one of them. As you mentioned, SDCs are only for capacity, and capacity related things on the system. However, capacity and capacity built into a system only lasts so long. Eventually we're going to have to replace pipes, replace streets, replace whatever it is. So hypothetically, if we're charging developers whatever SDCs we deem appropriate in building the gold-plated system, let's say, at some point that bill is going to become due. And if we built the fanciest sewer system on the planet, we're going to have an accrued liability that our ratepayers are going to have to be paying at some point. So when have you had many discussions about that as a consequence in these discussions with other cities or in your other consulting work? Because that's a natural consequence of this direct decision.
That's right. Yeah, we don't have this conversation nearly enough because I'm not always working with folks who are thinking that far ahead. But yeah, so let's give a simple example of what the counselor is talking about, because everything he said is correct. So you have a 6-inch pipe in the ground, okay? You're going to replace that with an 8-inch pipe. We're going to calculate the portion of that is new flow ability. And that is the portion that goes into your SDC. So you put in the 8-inch pipe, a little bit of it was funded by SDCs and you got the rest from rates, right? Time passes. And it's time to replace the 8-inch pipe. You don't need any more capacity for whatever reason. You just need to replace the 8-inch pipe with another 8-inch pipe. At that point, that's ratepayer responsibility in total. Forevermore, until you need more capacity. And when you need more capacity, SDCs will only cover the slice of that pipe that has additional flow capability. So that's right. Gosh, I don't want to take the counselor's remarks and start a rant, but he is correct. You know, local governments don't really have assets in the economic sense. You just have future liabilities of things that you have to replace, because whatever you put into the ground, there's an expectation that that's gonna serve people forever. And so you're gonna have to keep replacing it and repairing it, replacing and repairing. And if you have something big, you're gonna have to keep replacing it with something big. If it was expensive the first time, it'll probably be expensive the second, third, fourth, and fifth times.
Yeah.
So yes.
Yeah, that was all my first question, and as I was getting to if there was any strategies in place aside from rate paying, if there was ways to address those accrued liabilities. But thanks for elaborating. If it's just rate paying, great. As long as everybody's aware of that. You mentioned earlier that developers, we can't double dip with developers. Developers can't pay down debt. And I was curious about that. Let's say historically a town decided to put in a system that costs so much money to develop for so many users, and it costs the town X amount in debt for Y number of users. Developer comes along and the town accrued debt to do that. Developer comes along and says, I want to use this much allocation Y of your excess capacity, and I'm going to pay you this much. The town's been paying that debt already, And I believe if the town's already been paying that debt, would they not be running an actuarial table that says, hey, we've invested in the past for this capacity already in the past? Could they not run an actuarial table from that point in the past that they accrued the debt into the future and time value that debt to the point of development?
We don't see that. Now, I don't want to lead you to believe that, I don't want to lead you to believe that using SDCs to pay debt service is prohibited, because it is not.
Okay.
But to your example, you're talking about a set of assets that would be, if eligible for SDCs at all, would be in the reimbursement fee, because they're existing assets that have already been constructed. And the first question that you ask in that case is there available capacity for new users? If the answer is yes, then you can cost that out and put the portion that ratepayers are not going to be paying for into a reimbursement fee. The typical expectation is that if you are paying debt service and you have a remaining principal balance, your ratepayers are likely going to be paying that. That's probably built into their rates. And if so, if the ratepayers are paying that, then it would be considered double dipping to include that part of the cost in the SDC cost basis.
Sure. So we cannot take the original principal amount and time value that over time, regardless of, okay.
That's right.
Okay. And then one of the later on examples is you converted vehicle trips to person trips.
Mm-hmm.
And there's still one cost per person trip that is independent of per mode of travel. If someone walks, bikes, drives, takes the bus, it's irrelevant. Just if they're going from point A to B, it's the same SDC cost.
Well, you're not charging an SDC every time someone goes to the store. So these are estimates based upon data of what different land uses generate in trips, and the person trip generation will be slightly higher. I think it's like 1.6, 1.7, something like that, higher than the vehicle trip generation.
Sure. What I mean is, let's just take a household. And let's say it's 1.6 or whatever it is. Let's say that household is designed and built to accentuate alternative modes of transport, let's say e-biking or something, as opposed to driving as much. So let's say instead of their typical 2 vehicles or however many for that household, they have one, or they vehicle share with their neighbors or whatever it is. However, that mode of household is developed. So instead of driving places as their day-to-day, they're e-biking.
Right.
So
it's very hard to take that in consideration. And the reason why is when you're charging an SDC, not after a family moves in and you get to see their behavior. You get it when someone plops a set of blueprints on top of the desk, and you have to infer from the blueprints what is the nature of the activity in this building. So we end up with industry averages depending upon the land use type.
Okay. It sounds like a very, very rigid set of standards across use. Okay.
But what's the alternative?
Oh,
I mean,
and
we're talking about
I
things
get
that are
it.
unknowable at a certain point in time, right?
I get it.
Okay.
Okay. And then on slide 15, just a clarifying question. Do you also have that information as a dollar amount per square foot?
It could be converted, but No, these are in tiers.
Yep.
So the amount per square foot, if you keep it in tiers, the amount of per square foot will not remain constant.
Oh, I know.
But yeah, you could certainly divide. I mean, you could take, so if I understood your question, in the third row, you could take the $11,135.91. For 1,600 square feet, you could divide that by 1,600. And you would divide the same numerator by 1,700 if you had a 1,700 square foot house. You could divide it by 1,800 if you had an 1,800 foot house. And no, I'm not going to go through every increment, but it would. I'm not sure that would have much value because they're in tiers. But you could certainly charge it on a per square foot basis if you want a little more granularity in how you charge. You could absolutely do it that way.
Let me ask his question in a different way. If council lands on a different number, right, other than sort of the 11,135, using a water example.
Yeah.
Does this proportion remain the same as far as how it gets allocated to the different building sizes?
Oh, sure. Yes.
Right. So instead of the dollar per square foot, if Councilor Paulson wanted to see sort of the relative multiplier.
Right.
Right.
Yes,
So that we could look at sort of a range based on different values.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, but the proportion needs to stay the same.
Well, yeah, it would say the same. But to the counselor's point, you could also get at more absolute granularity by charging per square foot up to the point where the correlation no longer holds. And any other questions?
Yeah, just for my own edification, I haven't run through each item on this table, but it looks like at the maximum value per each category, in square footage and each water, sewer, transportation, the multiplier is roughly the same. So like 700 or 970 square foot times 5.56 gets you that amount. 2,000 square feet times 5.56 gets you that amount, on and on down the list. My thing is, once you get bigger, there seems to be the math is you get a bigger house, you get a bigger discount in terms of your SDC per square feet.
Yes.
If you cap out at, yeah.
Yes.
That was my question and kind of policy point about that table.
Yes, that is an absolutely correct observation. The growth in the SDC at about 2,600 square feet stops. There is a point where you don't pay greater SDC for a larger house. That's absolutely built into this, and the reason it's built in goes back to this table or this graph that shows that the number of people occupying a dwelling unit does not continue to correlate with size after a certain point.
As I was pointing that out more for other counselors' consideration regarding how SDCs are charged, as well as sizes of housing types in relation to market prices of various housing units. Thanks. Those are my questions. From one fellow spreadsheet nerd to the other. Thanks.
Hey.
Councilor Polson, we are very similarly aligned in some of these questions. So I want to just continue to highlight what was just brought up.
Sure.
We are trying to incentivize affordable housing, units that are smaller. And so when I look at this, it's the complete opposite of our intention, especially for West Side, is we want builders building more smaller houses. So there was a question around, or earlier, Chris, you were mentioning that SDCs that are not charged, are ratepayers paying those SDCs that aren't charged to that builder for building a 900 square foot?
No, not directly. Right. And so the improvement costs are what the improvements costs are for the infrastructure. And the question is, how is that getting paid? Right. And so whatever is not being paid by SDCs is being paid by some other source. Now it could be the ratepayers, it could be the city, right? But it would be another source.
So then help me understand our middle housing code. How much of a break are builders receiving in SDCs there?
There's no break for middle housing. Because the current SDC methodology is based on the unit count, not based up, which right now it is not scaled to square footage at all. It's per unit. So today's SDC numbers are based upon a 3/4 inch meter, which is a middle housing meter, which is a 5,000 square foot McMansion meter. Typically, unless we switch, the sewer charge is the same. The transportation charges, it's all flat and standardized today. So there's this scaling option that considers a 971 to 1,500 that doesn't exist in current city SDC methodology.
I mean, that seems like an inequity to me, right? Or it might be that I'm not understanding it correctly.
No, there's no different, right now, there's no differentiation for, it's not, you can consider it inequity or it's equality. They're all treated equal regardless of size. So there's tension there but that is the standard approach that the city has adopted, that we've followed for 15, 16 years now, since the transportation SDC went in.
I need to process this for a second, then I'll come back with another question.
I thought I heard earlier that credits could be issued.
Yes.
So if we decided, if you build something between 971 and 2,000 square feet.
Oh, that's not what I meant.
No, I'm not asking if that's what you meant. Is that a way to incentivize? Call it one of these tiers. 1,500, 2,000?
No.
Okay.
No.
So I guess, can you clarify, because I think there's confusion with regards to sort of statutory requirements and sort of consideration.
Okay, so let's back up and let's remember that SDCs are a form of exaction. They are you have a property owner going to city saying, hey, I want to build something. And then you have the city say, okay, give me stuff. It could be money, it could be land dedication, it could be some other form of exaction. This is perfectly appropriate for the city to say, give me stuff. Because when a property owner builds something on their lot, whatever they build is going to create more demands on the services and infrastructure of the city. So the city saying, give me stuff is appropriate. But there are limits. And one of the important limits that has come through kind of the judicial history of all this, I don't know if you've heard of the Nolan and Dolan cases. Those are the two. So those are the two. I don't know. Those are the two grand initial cases of exactions. Neither one of those was about SDCs or impact fees. It wasn't about money at that point. But then you have later on the Kuntz case, and most recently the Sheets case, which was about monetary exactions. But the judicial history of this says that if you charge something that is not proportionate to the impact of that development on your infrastructure, you are wrong. So we can develop structures like this that are more consistent with the city's policy to try to recognize the lesser impact of smaller dwellings. But we have to keep it within the four corners of an impact fee has to be proportionate to the impact of the property on the infrastructure. That's why it doesn't keep going up ad infinitum.
And Doug, I think that's the importance of the previous slide that discussed the number of humans.
Yes,
this is the importance of this slide. It shows a roll off. At some point, we cannot say that your impact on water and sewer over 2,500 square feet to 5,000 square feet is greater. Therefore, we would not be justified to assess a sewer or water rate higher because at that point, because we don't have the data that says you have a greater impact.
So,
And that's a lawful justification of methodology that we can't go beyond without data.
yeah. So just to, because I'm trying to frame this. If we wanted to incentivize in some way the development of affordable housing, this is not a mechanism in which to do that because we would violate anything. In terms of proportionality.
Yeah, you have limited room to maneuver.
Well,
I mean, it's not nothing. I mean, it is, I was puzzled by your comment that this is the exact opposite of what you're trying for. I mean, as far as I can tell, the numbers are smaller for smaller dwelling units. So this does seem to be consistent with what you're trying to do, and it's justifiable because there are fewer people typically in a smaller home up to a point.
So yeah, I mean, I understand the graph levels off, and therefore this levels off. I mean, is it tied specifically to the number of people that, like, could we, you know, subsidize, like, have it get even lower at the low end and go high, like, can we make the spread even bigger, or is that based on, like, you know, per person calculate, like, does that scaling have to be what it is?
Well, I mean, you need a few fixed points, and the fixed points that we have here are, you know, one person as an occupant at the bottom end. You have the 2,600 square feet where the correlation no longer holds at the top end, and then you have the kind of the average house size in the middle. So there are limits.
So I mean, I guess what I'm asking is, like, so if we're assuming the one person is the, you know, 970 or less. Like, does water have to be set at the 5,400 there, or could you say one person only costs 4,000? Like, how did you get that number on that low end?
Because it's proportional to the expected occupancy of your average dwelling unit.
Okay, so it is a set proportion that we can't play with.
Yeah, I mean, we wouldn't give you anything other than that.
Okay.
Yeah, but I will say, one way to, if you want more flexibility, I mean, I don't know how helpful this is gonna be, but one way to have more flexibility in accomplishing the things you want to do with the developers and providing those incentives is to bring money to the table. So you bring money to the table, you can do a lot of what you want to do. You end up paying SDCs or portions of SDCs on behalf of the developers who are doing whatever things you want those developers to be doing. I mean, if you bring non-SDC money to the table, that now you have purchased the right to turn this into a social policy rather than a very carefully regulated cost recovery tool. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
It does, and I want to clarify because I think I know the answer, but just to be sure, the flip side of that is if we were going to not charge the full maximum allowed rate, we have to do that for all of these sizes. We couldn't just say.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
So the only way to play with certain categories or housing types is to pay the fee in you know, for a developer. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Which which would be a separate policy, right?
Right. No,
Outside of the outside the SDC. Right?
Yeah.
So should there be a decision to create a program that incentivizes middle housing, right? They would not be part of the SDC rate. They would be separate apart.
How did we get so far off? Like, we're making a 259% increase, which seems like a lot.
Oh, that is not uncommon. So anytime you recalculate your SDCs, you open up a world of possible surprises, because any SDC calculation is based upon a look into the future from a point in time. And there might have been many more projects identified than were previously identified. Maybe growth is doing something different than it was. I have had the pleasure of going to some communities that are quite mature, and their SDC calculation reveals a much lower SDC than they are currently charging, and that is often quite unwelcome. So
Ensuring the residents are old, or they're
No,
all rich, or
no.
the trees are big, or
it means they're pretty built out.
built out.
There's probably not a lot of growth expected to happen, and therefore not a lot of capacity planning going on.
Okay. Kind of diving further back than this like summary page. I know it, and like, oh God, how do I phrase that? So like the transportation one, you said it's based on like just general industry averages for like a specific housing type. Says, oh, it's gonna be 4 peak hour trips.
Yeah, multiplied by a bunch of different land uses.
Right.
It gets pretty specific on the commercial side.
Okay, but so that is there within that, there's not an opportunity for either, like if an individual project has actually done a traffic analysis that they don't, can you use that instead?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. So for any SDC, there should be a provision in your code that covers this situation. If a developer, if you tell the developer, hey, here's what your SDCs turn out to be, because you have so many trips to being generated, you have your meters are of a certain size, you have so many impervious square feet, and this is what your SDCs turn out to be. A developer can point to one of those calculations and say, this doesn't fit me. This doesn't represent what I'm building here. And then there should be a process in your code for handling those kinds of appeals. And yes, one for transportation SDCs, it is often the case that the developer can bring forth a traffic study to the satisfaction of the city's engineer, and then that can be used to override the calculations.
Does that get to Councilor Paulson's point, which is if someone sort of argues that the house they built is specifically designed to reduce traffic, right? So I'm on a bike path, right? I've got sort of e-bike charging, things along those lines. Can an individual homeowner, or I'm sorry, home builder make the argument that their residential unit is more efficient than what the calculation is?
Yes, the appeals process would be available to anyone who wants to take advantage of it. But they have to bring evidence that the city would find compelling enough to change the charge.
Taking it one step farther, can the city as a policy define if your house has sort of these specific elements, right? Then that reduces your sort of your multiplier?
Yes, so we do have clients who have, see, and John, maybe you can maybe you remember some of these. I'm thinking of Corvallis. They have a specific geographic area in the downtown that is designed to minimize the need for a lot of vehicular movement and kind of a park once kind of deal. And so development in downtown in a certain defined geographic area has a certain discount on their SDC that is kosher because it is couched in terms of describing their differential impact. So the observation on the city's part is that developments in this particular area, because of how this area is configured, will have not as great of an impact on the transportation system as a similar development elsewhere.
That's a great thing, because my secondary question was is there a way to incentivize, you're closer to the core, you're doing infill, you're more likely to be able to walk and bike versus you've built out, 2 miles away on our main east-west road. And it sounds like there might be some options where we could identify specific, I guess.
It has been done.
Locations or things.
Yeah,
Okay.
it has been done. Now, anytime you do that, you'll have the scrutiny of developers developing elsewhere. And they'll want to make sure that, hey, that is a justified discount. Because you're all paying into, everybody's paying into one pool.
Right.
And everybody wants the infrastructure. And if there's a group of people who are not paying what is perceived to be their fair share, you're gonna have some upset.
Okay.
Presumably you need a report that probably FCS could provide, that would provide some justification.
And we would be happy to write that report.
And I guess, so flipping over to like water, where, the 3/4 inch pipe is, I think pretty much all residential except for really massive multifamily, is my understanding. Like, are there ways to dial that in again to, incentivize smaller, likely more affordable homes?
That's tougher.
Okay.
Because the size of your meter really does determine the amount of capacity that is available to you. It's nearly a perfect way to allocate SDCs and price SDCs. So there's less wiggle room there other than the scaling you can do. But meter size, really is kind of the perfect description of the capacity that you're buying into.
I don't want to cut anyone off, but some part of my brain has a sinking feeling that we could be here tomorrow talking about this. So I really want to figure out the scale and scope of this conversation.
Sure. So I think on purpose, right? We've done this before any sort of public notice period, right? So I wanted to make sure that we sort of had time to have this type of discussion. I think the steps that were outlined as far as next steps is, we worked backwards from the September 9th date. September 9th was fairly arbitrary. Was just trying to get it as sort of as quickly as I thought was reasonable. So whatever system was in place or fees were in place would sort of have an impact this next fiscal year. But obviously that can be moved. First step would be to do this 90-day notice. After that, there is this report that's circulated from FCS, which is basically sort of demonstrating how these numbers, these maximums were calculated, what projects were considered, what is the methodology that's used. So both of those things can happen outside of any discussions that are being had. The important note that he was noting is all this does is set a maximum amount, right? It would be that September 9th hearing, correct me if I'm wrong, but it would be that September 9th hearing by which City Council would institute an actual SDC rate, right? Whether it is the maximum, something less, right? But that is sort of between now and September 9th would be the work of determining what would be the rate. The remainder of it is statutory process.
That's a hugely political question.
Yes,
Because
yes,
different groups are going to complain depending on which we choose.
100%. Right, and the reason that I've sort of waited and wanted to wait to issue this 90-day notice, right, is to just sort of make sure that council is comfortable beginning to have those conversations.
Thank you. Megan?
So within that timeline and process, like how would we potentially discuss, identify, or approve like some of these, the flexible things of, if you have bike parking and charging for electric bikes or what, I don't know what the correct things would even be, but.
So I want to be very, very careful about sort of mixing different initiatives, right? Because they are related, but unrelated in process, right? The SDC, and again, correct me if I sort of overstep, but the SDC rate, it is a discussion of maximum or something less. Do we implement this type of scaling method, right? And right, do we sort of get up to a maximum amount, right? So in other words, we're going to set to a maximum amount, but we're going to get there in 2 years, 3 years, right? Or we're gonna set rates today, and here's gonna be our sort of increase that sort of what it's tied to, right? So the decisions that are made with regards to the SDC and sort of this specific is sort of how much is it graduated based on sort of what the tools are available, you know, and or is there some sort of growth to those rates, right? That is completely separate from any additional housing incentives that may be added on, right? The idea being is that the developers can qualify for lower SDCs by meeting certain qualifications for sort of housing type, housing, right, sort of housing characteristics. That would not be part of your SDC ordinance.
So, I mean, I'm aware if we're paying certain SDCs for a desired housing type, that's a whole separate thing, but I guess my understanding was if we've identified certain things that are gonna lead to less trips per unit or whatever,
Correct.
that's not actually like an FCC subsidy or whatever, so that wouldn't be in this process?
Well, I guess defining a separate housing type, right, would be something that I guess could either occur as part of the SDC process, or it would occur outside the SDC process and then be sort of brought into it.
So if you wanted to make some decisions outside of the SDC process, so let's say you say you didn't want to wait for all this to play out. You have a geographic area in mind, downtown Hood River or someplace else, that you think should be getting a 10% discount on their SDCs. You decide you wanted to pick that up right now because, you know, in theory, a 10% discount could be applied to SDCs, whether they're old or new, right? At that point, we would probably get your city attorney involved and the relevant question we would be asking was, is this a change in methodology that requires a new 90-day notice? That's always the question when you're changing something with regard to your SDCs. Does this change constitute a change in methodology that requires new notice, a new public hearing? And we'd want to answer that question. We'd probably get your city attorney's help to answer that question. But aside from that, they can be separate.
So to make that clear, if you look at the SDC fee schedule today, you'll notice there's different SDCs for different property types, right? And the common thread beyond that is that they all have some sort of defined either equivalent resident unit multiplier, or a cost per trip, or an impervious area sort of, right? There's that commonality.
Yes.
And so what we've been talking about with defining a preferred housing type that would have a different sort of SDC impact fee is using the same measurement, but that particular housing type has sort of a lower impact, right? So so for example, using the trips example, right now, one residential unit produces 1.6 trips, right? But if there are housing characteristics that are in the development, such as being on a bike path or near a bike path, having sort of, you know, either an EV, like a bike charging station or things along those lines, that there is a justifiable lower impact, right? Less than 1.6 trips per year, then that just gets added to the SDC schedule as another product type, right?
Or what a lot of other places do is if you want to influence behavior, the incentive is like, because the problem is you could say, yeah, we're gonna have bike charging station or whatever, you still could drive, right? There's nothing to prevent you from doing that.
Yeah.
So the idea is in a lot of communities and other countries, what they do is they say, oh, we'll just raise parking lot and then you'll want to ride your bike. Right? So there are ways to influence behavior, get people to ride more bikes. You know, one of them is to provide more infrastructure, but at some point, you know, there has to be some incentive not to drive, right? Monetarily.
So I guess the question that I would have from council as far as sort of directing staff is what sort of what's done next is, does council want to wait on this SDC sort of rate discussion until such time as there's the, you know, sort of larger sort of housing incentive program discussion.
What I'm feeling, in addition to the tomorrow terror, is that you're telling us about this awesome shovel and you're describing the shovel. And what we really want to do is paint the house. Like, oh, we scoop it up and sling the pit, like, we don't care about this. No offense.
No, that's fair.
We have this housing goal
Yeah,
and we're trying to make this useful.
yeah, and it doesn't go very well, does it? Because SDCs are fundamentally a cost recovery tool based upon impact. And it doesn't, you're not going to find it a very accommodating to what you're wanting to do with it.
Thank you. So I really don't have a sense of like what to do, like, it's, you know, not early. This is super important, this is super interesting, but it's sort of budgeting the neurons is where I'm at.
Yeah.
It's like, we don't get to have them come back again and do the next third and fourth hour of this conversation.
Yeah.
That would be awesome.
Chris, you got any thoughts, Abigail?
Well, Mayor, I think the question before you today is, do you want to start the 90-day process? Do you want to spend the next 3 months reviewing the data and diving deeper into this with the goal of hitting a public hearing in September? Or do you, I think Chris just offered, if you want to set this aside, work on some other pieces, and then come back to this, although this isn't going to change dramatically. So do you want to work on this for the next 3 months, or do you want to set this aside? I think the fundamental question tonight,
Fundamentally,
do you want to move
that's
forward?
correct.
Given the fact that we can't paint the house with it, do we want the shovel? It's a good shovel.
I think Councilor Saunders has a comment, a
Thanks.
question.
Yeah, so to answer that, I guess, based on what we've heard, I think the places where we were talking about, can we play with it, are not gonna require this 90-day notice, so we can move forward with that, still play with those. I guess I'd love to have on Abigail's, parking lot list for future work plan is that we are looking at how to incentivize affordable housing, how to do, actually, and I know we don't have a lot of money in there, but like UCT or something to, subsidize the housing types or housing costs we want. And look at those other pieces outside of the study, but.
Great, and you might remember that Will has been working with some graduate students from Willamette, looking at developer incentive programs, so. I think we've got a parallel track on that, but it is a little bit behind this conversation.
I will add, and I'm sorry, I will add, the one tool that is in here that does not exist in the SDCs today is this graduated sort of, this graduated charge. So to the extent this is part of this, to Dustin's point, this does not exist today, right? So this would be one way to sort of advance that.
Yeah, and I think this frames this in the right way, which is, we often hear from developers, I have all these SDCs that I have to pay. But it's not really, at the end of the day, it's about incentives that would offset that, not incentivizing this. And I think we know that now, and it seems pretty clear to me that we kind of have to, it's good that we can do the scaling. That's an improvement. It obviously isn't a huge difference, but it's a difference.
So I think the bottom of the page says that the goal is for us to receive the presentation. So if we can declare that we have received the presentation, that's our instruction. But we have to give it, like, do we want to start the 90-day?
That's really the question.
Anybody want to, Grant, I haven't heard much in a little bit. We okay starting the 90-day?
Yeah, I'm okay starting the 90 days. To use your analogy, we have a lot of stuff to do with our house. Painting it is one thing. We also need our shovel. We have yard work to do. We have some foundational stuff to do. We have all sorts of stuff to do to our house.
Thank you so much. Wow, fascinating.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
We're gonna take a break.
It's the little
Moving on to the consent agenda, I would entertain a motion.
I would move we approve the consent agenda.
Moved by Megan,
I'll second.
second by Doug. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Chair votes aye, motion passes. Action items, resolution, Abigail Elder.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a topic that I think we discussed back in April, and you gave some pretty clear direction on where you'd like to go with counselor and mayor compensation. So I hope that the resolution before you reflects the direction that you gave us. This has tying council compensation to the area median income, so 10% for counselors and 20% for the mayor. So that way it's nice that it will continue to, we can just check that every year and then adjust that, gives us real nice predictability for the budget. I also heard from you last time, a small stipend for technology, that seems appropriate. I'm recommending, or we're recommending $100 a year, so that over a 4-year term, that would be $400. So that part is something you had recommended, but that number had not been discussed. So happy to answer any questions or thoughts, and then there's a motion for your consideration.
I guess, and honestly, I'm thinking of it right now and not earlier. Purchasing a computer, I mean, an iPad is like what, $1,000, $700?
You can get a refurbished one. For probably probably got mine refurbished for like $300-something. So you can get one that's useful for, our purposes for email packets, things like that. We wouldn't wanna, I would assume we could do that upfront for a 4-year term versus $100 per year, or maybe that's not an assumption.
No, we could do that. I mean, we are looking for easy predictability in the budget, but certainly, we can add for election years and then break down in non-election years.
It would certainly lead us to like, not get the cool, expensive thing and.
Right, yeah,
So,
no, just to get your emails and whatnot, just because I was talking to a couple of the commissioners and they actually have a laptop. I mean, they get paid, this is like their job, they actually get paid real money to do this work, but that was also part of the package, is they have an actual laptop computer that is given to them to do any and all of their county duties.
Megan and then Craig.
I guess I wanted to clarify, do we need to actually go through this whole potential conflict of interest?
We'll get there.
Do we have to check
Yes,
with that?
I talked with the mayor about doing just kind of a blanket statement, and I see Dan coming on.
So what Abigail recommended I say is, it's obvious that all of us are equally applies to us, but because or after we are subsequently elected or selected, it's not a problem and we may participate. How'd I go, Dan? How'd that sound, Dan? Is that addressing?
Right, because all of you have a direct financial stake in the outcome of this vote. And so it's the same conflict. And so you should deal with it all in the same way.
And clarifying it's a potential conflict, not an actual conflict.
If you're increasing your compensation, that's actual.
But we're not unless we were to get
It's
reelected.
It's potential well, I mean, yes, that would be my assumption is 1, you'd have to choose to run again, and 2, the voters would have to choose to put you back in your, for an additional term.
Right, so it wouldn't, the election changes that, so you're voting for the compensation for the position that you currently sit in. And so it's the same for all of you.
Right, so I think, Dan, the question was, is it a potential conflict of interest, or is it an actual conflict?
Well, if you adopt this without any delay in implementation, it's actual.
But there is.
But that's not what's proposed. That's not what's proposed. What's proposed is the next person that is elected will get this extra money.
Right, so that excludes you from having the conflict.
Right.
Thank you. Was that your own question, Megan?
Yes.
Grant.
Another question about or comment about the $100 stipend for tech. I believe it was a discussion more about not us going out and purchasing our own tech. But having either city issued or similar to what the county does, tech issued to us that was city property that we used for city business. That way, if we get FOIA'd or whatever, it's all right there. It's not on a separate tech piece. If we're not ready for that part of it, I would rather just cut that part out of this and not deal with it at this time. And not have the $100 stipend as part of this, than include it.
I agree with Grant. It's to me, that was a good idea that got added on to the core idea of the raising the stipend. Oh, sorry, second.
Could we change it so that the city can provide?
Sure, and I will say for employees, the city has two options, right? So a city employee some city employees may choose to use their own phone and then they receive a stipend through the city, or they can choose to have a city phone provided for them. So I don't know if you want to give yourself the option or if you want the city to provide the equipment. And then the one thing is that can be difficult is that when you leave, it can be hard to get that back from you.
I think most of us would just need an iPad or similar device. I don't think for practical reasons, most people are having second or third phones at this point. Most people are just using their
Sure.
personal cell phone numbers.
Yep, just using
communicate.
that as an example of the city having a bring your own device policy.
Yeah, okay. So if we're issued tech, we should be very clear about what we're issued and that it is city property. That there's very clear best practices that are available to us. That should keep this a very sterile and simple conversation.
I was just gonna add to what Counselor Polson already mentioned. Once that counselor is sworn in, right, they're signing that document that says, hey, we let you use this iPad number 15. Once you're done, you need to return iPad number 15 to the city.
Right, we have employee policies about technology, so we can apply those to you as well. Yeah, the one thing would be there would be here's the city standard thing. You can have this or you can have this. And if you want a third thing, that would not be available unless you allow for a bring your own device policy.
And just to clarify that, everybody that's interested in this topic, this isn't to take a financial burden off of us. It's more for being able to separate, our city email, our city notes and packets that we choose to have them from our personal devices, because that's a huge liability for a counselor. So
That's really what I feel like is the morph is Doug has brought up. I think you haven't brought up this issue, which is like, Paul, the way you're doing it probably isn't so safe, which is not a money thing. That's like a behavioral thing. Like I am not dying to carry an extra iPad around.
agreed.
But when, it's all fun and games till you get foiled, so.
Well, I mean, to that point, from a data security end, as long as you're not intermingling your outlooks, your email, it doesn't matter what device you're reading it on, your email is in a separate place.
Is that true?
Not a technology expert, but I believe you have office.com or you have an online version. You're not downloading it to a computer. Yeah. You're using a cloud-based version of the city services.
But if somebody thinks I'm doing the wrong thing, they're gonna foil my.
And to that end, if you're gonna download something that somebody has sent to you via the cloud. Unless we're using, and again, this is a behavioral thing, unless I'm putting it into our city provided cloud storage, G Drive, whatever it is, then it just makes it a lot easier to separate it. And yeah, I know people decide sometimes to have, a phone for work and a phone for personal use, and that gets kind of annoying. And someone could say, well, I'd rather just have both and do a stipend. But this is a lot more about data security, a lot more about FOIA, all that kind of stuff in my mind.
Yeah, if you guys want, we can table the tech piece of this for now. and just do the other part until we flesh out the tech part for later. But it's up to the will of everyone.
I can't find page 93. That's what?
You're missing. Your,
They're never in that.
your packet is incomplete?
I just learned. Yeah, it's not numbered. Counselor Polson, can you help me understand what you mean? I mean, I think what I think I heard was that we all agreed to having, you know, a document that the new counselor would sign stating, hey, you're gonna get this piece of technology. Once your term is over, you return that. So I'm trying to understand what you're stating around, we should wait for the technology piece.
Oh, no, just if that's already fleshed out, I'm physically not there, so I lose some context. If that's already fleshed out and we all are in consensus about all of that, then cool. I was just offering an alternative. If we needed to have additional discussions about the tech thing, we could have additional conversations about it. If we were all ready to move forward with it, then we could.
Megan.
So actually, a question for Abigail, because I'm
Mhm.
looking at the resolution itself.
Mhm.
It looks like the $100 stipend isn't in there.
Right.
So we're not approving that, or
Right.
the current proposal wasn't approving that anyway.
Right, it was you're right, like we could do that separately. I mean, it's just a budget piece. We can just add that. Or what I'm hearing today is if you want the city to just purchase equipment, then there is no stipend, right? You get a piece of equipment that is then returned to the city when you're finished with your term.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I, from my end, it seems like city provided makes more sense. Yeah.
Okay,
But I'm
Great.
also like, because the resolution doesn't clarify this anyway, I'm cool with moving forward the resolution.
okay.
A resolution to have you allow you to give us iPads?
No, not particularly not if they're gonna continue to be city property and you're not, I'm not giving you a stipend for them.
Then I think it's fine to divorce the conversation as
Okay.
long as we can
Great.
get that going.
It sounds like we're ready for a motion.
I move that we adopt resolution 2024-07 relating to counselor and mayor compensation.
Moved by Rivera,
Second,
second by Saunders. Discussion?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm running again, but at some point, potential conflict of interest may arise if I am elected again at 2.5, 3 years from now.
Yes, I hear that, and identical for each of us.
Yes.
Just checking the box.
But I'll say it in unison.
I have a potential conflict of interest.
And a potential conflict of interest.
I have a potential conflict of interest.
As do I. Okay, any further discussion? All in favor?
I
Opposed? Chair votes aye, motion passes. I'm really excited about this, you guys. I've been hyping it in venues. And had a robust conversation with Mark Bailey about it this morning and yeah, I'm progress. Okay, back to the beginning. Filling the vacancy. I think we have kind of a good system. Abigail, remind us.
Yeah, thank you. Your council rules are very, they lay out the process of how this would work. So I've articulated that and included that text here. It was important to me that you did the council compensation decision first before we had this conversation, because this position now, based on the vote that you just took, would be eligible for that stipend, and we want to be able to advertise the recruitment, including that. So thank you for a clear direction on that. I think if you just look at your timeline, which is on the second page of the memo, but not numbered, you can see that I think if we could publish the notice of the vacancy either this week, probably end of this week, or by Monday, leave it open for a month. And then to have interviews in a July meeting and then appoint the person either late July or in early August. That process seems pretty clear cut in your rules. I think the last time the council did fill the vacancy was when Mayor Blackburn had moved away, and so you needed to fill the mayor position and you had to appoint another councilor. So we have the paperwork of how that happened last time. So I think we've got some forms that can really get us started. And I think with that one, and my recommendation to you as well, would be at that time, there were two counselors. In fact, I think it was Councilor Cunahan was one of them, and maybe Councilor Mehta, who served as a little subcommittee with the city recorder and the city manager to just kind of move things along and then just brought things. So if you're willing to delegate to a small subcommittee, then we can maybe move things a little bit faster. So that's part of the suggested motion that you have there as two blanks for who would like to be in that. But happy to answer any questions. And of course, Dan is available too if we have any policy or legal questions you might have on this.
Questions for Abigail? Willingness to serve,
I'm open.
Megan, Doug.
Gladys
Oh, excuse me,
Her hand was up first.
Gladys and Megan.
Okay.
Great. Okay, I need an official motion then. And there's a suggested motion on the page.
All right.
I move that we direct the city manager to publish a notice of vacancy and begin the process of filling the council seat previously held by Councilor Tim Cunahan. I further move that we appoint council members Gladys Rivera and Megan Saunders to serve on the councilor selection committee, subcommittee.
Moved by Saunders,
Second.
second by Rivera. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? Chair votes aye, motion passed.
Great, thank you all. We will let you know as soon as the announcement is up, because we'll definitely need your help publicizing that out to as many people as we possibly can. I will also note, we know that the election cycle will start. We hope to have this finished before the deadline for people to file. So at least folks will know, where we are and who's being appointed, in case that might inform people's decision on to whether or run. That filing deadline is in mid-August.
Great,
Great.
recreational immunity.
All right, this is the third and last one I have for you today. As you all are aware, recreational immunity is that protection that is provided to property owners when they allow people to recreate. There was a hiccup in recreational immunity this year. The legislature did a temporary fix on that. But we need to opt in to that fix. So your city attorney has prepared a resolution for your consideration. And then next year, the legislature will hopefully create a more permanent fix, and then we bring back probably something to incorporate into the ordinance. So my thanks to Dan, who has brought this forward in a short amount of time for your consideration.
Seems to me the obvious only move is to stick with the herd on this one. And to do as a.
Yes, I think most of the agencies in our area have already done so.
So I move to adopt resolution 2024-08 to establish recreational immunity in the city of Hood River.
Moved by Saunders.
Second.
Second by Councilor Stupina. Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Chair votes aye, motion passes. Awesome. City recorder ordinance.
Your Honor, I'd like to entertain a motion for the second and final reading for 2082 by title only.
So moved.
So moved by Paulson. Second by
Rivera.
Rivera. Thank you. Roll call, please.
Councilor Stupina.
Aye.
Councilor Polson.
Aye.
Councilor Saunders.
Yes.
Councilor Rivera.
Yes.
Your Honor.
Aye.
Ordinance 2082, an ordinance making certain determinations and findings related to and approving the first substantial amendment to the waterfront urban renewal plan and directing that notice of approval be published.
Ordinance 2082 has had its second and final reading, will become law in 30 days. City manager comments.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Just a couple quick comments. One, second and note, traffic light went live last week. My thanks to the city and really to Randy and Adam, John, Kelby, all the folks at Robin Public Works who worked really hard to get that done, and to ODOT who had told us it might take a couple weeks. Some of you may know that, others didn't, that we thought it was a nail biter there for a while. So ODOT really came through, and our thanks to them. Cascade and Rand will likely go live this week, if not early next week. So in a space of just a couple of weeks, we'll have 2 new traffic lights. We are scheduled for a special meeting on June 3rd. This is our city-county joint meeting. It starts at 4 p.m., so it's an earlier start for us, and it will be held here at City Hall. We've publicly noticed that meeting. I expect an agenda to go out on Thursday.
I just now have learned that it's 4 o'clock.
4 p.m.
Oh,
Should be on your calendars
I
up.
just didn't like have that
Everybody else got that? 4
internal.
p.m.
I saw the email, but I don't remember seeing an invite.
I think I will double check, but I think you have a calendar invite, but let me double check that and send it again.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I think the calendar invite will be like on your calendar. It's not yet a Zoom invite. So if you're gonna plan to attend remotely,
Cause
let us
I
know.
see the attachment for the John Morgan meeting.
I sent the calendar invite several weeks ago. So, but yes, you have no homework, but I did send you the report that John Morgan gave us from his January 6th meeting, just in case you wanted to review that. So we had a meeting, January 6th. The county had a meeting in March. That is also televised. You know, that is available if you wanted to watch that, but that is absolutely not a requirement. And then my last item is Councillor Coonahan was our representative to the Energy Council. So they are looking for someone to take his spot. There's not an urgent rush, but I wanted to let you all know that. I will find out more about like what the time commitment is, what days they meet, a little bit more about what that is, but I want you all to be thinking about who might be interested and willing to do that.
Thank you.
That's it.
Committee reports, Grant.
ODOT Region 1 Act is next week on Monday at the same time as our meeting with the county, so I can't be in 2 places at once. So I don't have any other committee reports.
None.
Megan,
Nothing.
Gladys.
Yeah, just another kind reminder that on May 31st, Friday at 11 a.m. is the grand opening of the Gloria Center, 11 a.m. We met 2 weeks ago. They met today, same time as we were, so I didn't attend today's meeting, but I wanted to point out something that really stood out in the last report that Kenny had brought to us is currently the annex has 30 kids that are living there. And that took me a little, you know, that hit me in the stomach. Poverty and houselessness is, you know, impacting our kiddos. And this is happening in our community. And another great reminder that we need a year-round shelter here in Hood River, because if there's 30 kiddos that are being shuttled back and forth from Hood River to the Dalles, there could be more here that we don't know of. When we give our children an opportunity to stabilize, the issue doesn't pass on to the next generation. So kind reminder this is an opportunity for us to remove those inequities, and that the Gloria Center is really the first of its kind. All the resources that you can think of are provided in one physical location, as opposed to, you know, I have to take time off work and go from one end of town into this office over here into the office on the Heights and go back downtown. So it's exciting to see a lot of work behind it. I really want to thank Kenny and all of his efforts. There is a lot of backlash in the community in the beginning, and I think as folks have seen the success around the annex, something that seemed really scary isn't so scary anymore. And to just hear the incredible impact that it's having on many families who are now permanently housed, and an opportunity for some of these kiddos is exciting. So May 31st, 11 o'clock. I can't think of the Gloria Center address at the top of my head, but I believe you all received an invite. If you haven't, please let me know.
Mayor comments? I can't think of anything. Gladys, council comment?
Yeah, so yesterday was Memorial Day. I want to thank all of those that have served our country and given us the freedoms that we do. One of the incredible opportunities that we have is freedom of speech. And I want to use the platform that I have just to talk about something that I know many of you are witnessing in the news, and that's the dehumanization of people that just can't be normalized. The genocide in Gaza must end. I want to read a quote that has stuck with me, and I can't really get it out of my head. Today I found my son's head 10 days after finding his body. I am now carrying it to his grave, my heart pounding with joy. Today I can give him a complete death. Today I can weep for him as I should. I know that we as a council don't have a impact to stop this today, yesterday. But what we're experiencing is just gut-wrenching. I'm surprised that no one was here today to speak about a resolution that I know folks have asked us to pass, and I know we set out a statement. And just feeling really, really helpless that this isn't something that we can stop and that we have an impact. So I have done my best to make sure that I'm reaching out to my elected officials that represent me, making sure that I'm reaching out to those in higher power, making sure that I'm sending these messages through my social medias, through all the platforms that I possibly have, because we are so strong together. And I just hope that this madness ends soon. And as a mother, I can't even imagine.
Megan.
Thank you, Gladys. Yeah, I don't have anything to add there. And nothing else from my end.
Doug.
So Second and Oak, I've heard from a lot of people, about how they liked how the street was closed. So I don't want to talk too much about it right now, but I definitely think it's something I want to bring up during the work plan session to address how we might scratch that itch. Definitely not the response I expected from the community. I expected most people to be yelling about how they had to drive around, and a lot of people came away with that takeaway, which is something that I know myself, Counselor Polson, and others have discussed in the past. So, don't want to add too much to city staff's time, but I think come December, it might be something to talk about. That's all.
Thanks, Doug. Grant.
I'll talk about a concept related to not specifically that intersection, but something else. There are a number of ideas and concepts we can talk about or are brought to us as ideas from people in the community. And we have a somewhat brief venue at City Council during council call. Right now, it is currently about 9 o'clock. We've been here in this meeting for about 3 hours. It's a difficult time to bring up new concepts or have much in-depth discussion about issues or ideas or things that fundamentally affect our community. And we don't really have much space to do that. I hope that we as a council can create some more of these sorts of forums to do that. I would like to do that a couple times a year between all of us at a couple of meetings. Hopefully we can do it at least at the winter strategic meeting in December, where we get set aside some time and have it loosely structured, where we have some set of issues that we're going to talk about in depth, and we really get into them. It's not as much a guided process as much as us, the elected officials, talking about whatever the issues are in depth, exploring all the facets and nuance that are around whatever issues are brought to us that we feel are important that we need to talk about. from things that I've talked about with messing around with the TSP and reevaluating how people travel through our community, to how people are housed in the community and afford to live here, to how people work in the community, to issues we talked about tonight with how SDCs dovetail into housing affordability. All these things, how they interplay with each other in how people in our community live. These topics, I think we don't have a chance to discuss enough. And I think we could use some additional time to do so in our more often, hopefully a couple times a year. So that's all I got for tonight.
Thank you, Grant. Anything else for the good of the order?
I just want to second that, when talking about our TSP, our SDCs, right, that haven't been revised in a very long time, that there should be a list of items that we're revisiting on a yearly basis, such as the community engagement plan that we were all discussing earlier, and that's something that should be talked about more frequently.
Anybody else? We are adjourned. Thank you. Piper.